Welcome everyone. I think I'll start. I know some more people possibly coming down, but welcome. You might find that I'm a little bit kind of furry. I've still got jet lag. I woke up at 2 a.m. this morning and it was impossible to get back to sleep again. So please forgive me for that. I might be a bit wobbly on my feet. Hopefully I'm going to sort of tell you a bit of a story. It's a bit of a fairy tale really, of a meeting of pedagogy and technology. I'll first do a bit of housekeeping. So that's that challenge code, GH7L. And I wanted to clarify a bit of language because I might slip in and out of using the wrong language. But in Australia, we call units. We call them units. In America, you call them courses. And courses for Australians are qualifications for Americans. And if I use the term space, I'm really referring to a Brightspace unit or a Brightspace area. And if I use the term VU Collaborate, that's our term for Brightspace. Last one I'm probably not going to use, but just to let you know, if I use the word thongs, I'm talking about flip-flops. Okay. A little bit about Victoria University. We're a dual sector university, so we have vocational education and higher ed. We have around 25,000 higher ed students and around 11,000 vocational students. We have 11 campuses in Victoria, but we also have campuses in Sydney, India, China, Indonesia and Malaysia. We're in the world top 2% universities, and we're in the top 50 of young universities around the world. So, at Victoria University, we've had significant problems over the years. We've had high fail rates, large withdrawals. Financially, we haven't been too hot, really. And it was getting to a point where we had to do something. We really had to change what we were doing. And we scanned the literature to sort of get an idea about what we were doing incorrectly and what we needed to sort of improve on. But in essence, we felt we were doing all of this. This is sort of bread and butter, really, in education. So we weren't quite sure where we were going wrong. We paid careful attention to engagement, the design of assessments. We encouraged contact with students and staff. We were really trying to improve on provision of feedback to students and fast forward feedback for students, but evidently it wasn't working. So if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. We really needed to do something radical. And we decided that we'd go and look overseas. We'd heard about the block model in the US and in Canada, and we went to Colorado College and Quest University and had a look at what they were doing around what they called the block model. And when we got back to Melbourne, we sort of thought, well, it just seems so logical to get the students to do units sequentially rather than in parallel. Why would you want students to study 4 things at the same time when they could just study one thing at once and get the benefit of that? And if you think about standard delivery, students study 4 things. They then have, at the end of the year, a period of high intensity with exams and the such, and then they finish. And what often happens, and this is just 1 unit, so this is times 4, you have a situation where students have peaks of assessment. They then at some point will get some feedback, and then they have a peak of assessment and then some feedback. And ridiculously, their final feedback is after they finish the unit. So really, what purpose is that feedback? So looking at the block model, we felt, well, we can improve on this. So, is the volume up? I'll just go back. So, sorry, could someone turn the volume up a little bit? So I'm going to show you a video of the first year block model. We started with the first year. We've now, due to its success, rolled out across the university, but we're now into our second year of first year delivery, and this is...
First-year model. Traditionally, you juggle the demands and deadlines of 4 units at once. Instead, the first-year model has you focus on 1 unit at a time. Your first year will be broken into 2 semesters. Each semester will be broken into 4 blocks, which run for 4 weeks. You focus on 1 unit in each block, completing all your assessments before moving on to the next. So, instead of this, your first year looks like this. The first year model offers you flexible study options, support from 1 teacher per unit, and practical hands-on teaching methods that prepare you for your future. So when you study at VU, you know you'll gain the support and skills you need to succeed.
Okay, so just a little bit more on that. We run 4 units in a semester. Each unit is for 4 weeks, and underlying that we have complementary activities which the students can undertake to support their learning in those actual blocks. And now we basically seeing a total difference in the way our units are delivered and our ability to provision feedback. In week 1, we start our assessments. So by the 3rd day, students have their first piece of assessment. And the feedback usually comes the next day on that assessment item. And that feedback flows through, fast-forward feedback over the 4 weeks, and their final piece of assessment is usually on a Wednesday of the final week. So really, we have a situation where students are able to, or we're able to stage those assessments over that 4-week period. Okay, so we started looking at what we felt block units should be. In essence, we have 3-hour face-to-face sessions every single day. For 3 days a week, but scheduled to suit students. So students can do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, or they can start on a Tuesday. We try and always separate 1 day between face-to-face, so that gives the students time to do any assessment items or cover any work that they have to do. We have to rely very heavily on our learning management system. We have small class sizes and therefore close contact with the educators. And I've mentioned the need for timely and impactful feedback. And the whole structure is built very much about active and collaborative learning. We drew up a few principles. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these were principles of the block. And you'll note there's a little pink asterisk next to them. Those pink asterisks represent where we felt there was going to be impact of these principles, which would therefore require us to use a learning management system to actually achieve those outcomes. And as you can see, most of them tend to use or would rely on the use of a learning management system to be achieved. And there's the second list. In terms of things like peer feedback and collaboration, be achievable within a 4-week time frame. We couldn't actually do that without technology. So, I didn't mention, the other principle of the block is there will be no lectures. We have no lectures. We no longer have lecture capture. It's gone, ended. So, the transmissional mode of education has been hopefully wiped off at VU. We no longer see that. Those 3-hour sessions might be held in a classroom, in collaborative groups. They might be held outside, so in the workplace. We try and use those 3 hours in very much an active learning sort of format. The other thing we don't do anymore is exams. Really, in 4 weeks, it's impossible to have an exam. I say we don't. In fact, we still run exams in law and in health and bio subjects, and that's really because we have no alternative. The governing body has specified that we must have an exam, and that usually occurs on the Wednesday of the 4th week. But again, we do that within Brightspace, The exam is in Brightspace, and it's in a classroom environment. So we haven't moved to fully online, and I don't think we will do for a variety of reasons. But any exams yet in an invigilated classroom. So this is a kind of traditional timetable with different colours for different units or courses. So you can see, as you all would be aware, I'm sure if you're not running a block, it's a pretty busy timetable for students. We've moved to now this scenario where students only come in for 3 days and have those 3-hour sessions. In fact, the hours are exactly the same. So we're not diminishing the number of face-to-face hours that students have. Okay, so all that sounds really easy, doesn't it? It's just a matter of changing the timetable a little bit to accommodate 4 weeks rather than 12 weeks. In fact, it's probably the biggest things I've ever been involved in terms of pedagogy and technology, because it's not a matter of just taking 12 weeks of learning and squashing it into 4. It's about totally re-envisioning the way it is actually run, re-looking at assessments. Can they be achieved in 4 weeks? Are they really authentic? So we have a team of 25 learning designers who've been working over the past few years. As I mentioned, we've finished the first year units. We're now on to the second and third year units, and we have around 1,400 units in total to complete. So by 2020, we're hoping to have the whole university running within a block mode. So we looked at what we really required: enrolment, scheduling, consistency within the learning spaces, learning activities, etc., assessment, grading, analytics. All of that really needed to be done using some form of automation. There was no way otherwise it would happen. So I just put this up. This is, you can't really see it, doesn't matter, but in 2011 when we moved to Brightspace, this was how our technology looked in the university and the intersections between the learning management system, the student management system, the course management system, timetabling, etc. So it was pretty complex in 2011. It got incredibly complex afterwards. So really the block had impact on every single level of operation at the university. So whether it was administrative systems through enrolment, standards and regulations, research and scholarship, students and teaching, it had impact everywhere. Timetabling had to change, everything changed. So the technology challenge was really, we've already automated a lot of what we do for a 12-week semester model, but we will still be running 12-week semester models for the next few years until we build up all levels across the university. So we need to keep those. 12 don't go into 4, so we have this huge project in terms of learning design in remodeling, so that's a major aspect. But also in terms of the technology, we wanted to ensure that students had a seamless 4-week study period, which really meant that all resources had to be ready from day one and within the learning management system. So as soon as the students got into VU, 1 week prior to their start, we wanted them to have access to absolutely everything they would need in those 4 weeks. Tight turnaround for the block. So that really meant that we had to look at how we would automate grades and the return of those grades and also feedback. And we needed to report student progress early. So every week we would have assessments early on, formative assessments, which would then feedback using Brightspace APIs to our central Oracle information system so that that could be tracked and passed across to our retention staff to contact students if required. And as I mentioned, we have no big exams, no lectures, so we had to look at alternatives in terms of assessments. So the solutions are sort of, because of time, I'm going to quickly run through some of them, but we created what are called master spaces where the content is built. So every unit there is a master space where the content is held, and that is copied across to a delivery space when a delivery of that unit is going to be or is scheduled through the student management system. Groups, so we have Allocate Plus groups, so our group system at the university is Allocate Plus. We also have locational groups at different campuses, so what we do is we automate the creation of groups in Brightspace from those systems. So we create sections for every single locational group and for every cohort group, and also based on course and timetable. So the academic doesn't have to create any organizational or management groups, or indeed tutorial groups. They're all provisioned for them. Early formative assessment and analytics, we're very big on using H5P as an interactive tool, and in every space on day 2 there is an H5P interactive about the unit, or as an early diagnostic tool. That passes scores back into the gradebook. We then pull those scores through, again to our Oracle system, to identify whether there are students at risk of dropping out or not really engaging in the content. Then we have our grades return policy, so that at the end, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail, where we return our grades from Brightspace straight to the student management system and then release those to the students. We also had we realized that a lot of students were saying they wanted to use their mobile apps for learning. We had 6 mobile apps, and we decided that in the process of blocking, we would also look at how we could improve that and consolidate 6 apps into one major app, which we did in-house. So in terms of the learning design, and I'm not really going to talk about the learning design in a great amount of detail, but we basically modified the ADDIE principle or framework for looking at how we would change those units from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. And really that involves scanning all the data of previous delivery, what worked, what didn't work, and then looking at a redesign. So we have a team of the learning designers. 3 learning designers would work with one group of academics, 1 unit at a time, over a 6-week period to make that significant change. So templates and master spaces, we decided that content must be ready for students on day 1. None of this kind of, 3 weeks into the study period would academics load up new content for their students. It had to be ready and waiting. We wanted a consistent design so that every space was familiar to a student. They didn't have to look for where the readings were going to be or what was going to be available in terms of on week 1 or in session 1, etc. So we wanted that templating of the design. And we still had to look at how we were going to cater for the 12-week semesters. And in the end, we decided the only thing we could do is basically automate all our processes. So again, you don't have to read this, but this was how we had set up D2L or Brightspace in terms of on an organizational structure level. We had college templates, and we had templates for online delivery and 12-week delivery. So we needed to add to that, and we created new templates, a block template for every single unit of delivery. So basically, the process is our course management system. When a new course is entered into the system, it triggers that information being passed across to our student management system, which then triggers a space, being a master space for that unit being created in Brightspace. In fact, not just one master space, but a master space for pure online delivery, a master space for block, a master space for offshore delivery, and also the master space for 12-week delivery. So the academics build their content in those master spaces. When those master spaces are actually created, they also have a template overlay which is put on top of them with the structure, basically information which the academics can fill out on things like an introduction to the students on the unit, and information about what assessments they'll do, readings, etc. So it's all basically templated. So at the point of delivery, basically Callista or SMS triggers that there is going to be a delivery of that unit. That then triggers the creation of a space, a delivery space, and the enrollment of students into that space. At that point, all the content from the master space is copied across to the delivery space, and also any staff enrollments. So the unit conveners who are in the master space will automatically be copied across, ready for delivery. Academics have access to these delivery spaces 2 weeks prior to delivery, and students have access to them 1 week prior to delivery, so they can orientate themselves before they actually start into the block process. So it's a tight turnaround, a very tight turnaround, and grades have probably been the one thing that we really needed to provision to the students as soon as they'd finished a unit of delivery. To do that, we had to put all our grades in Brightspace. So basically, whether that's a manual input into the gradebook or whether it's an automatic transfer via, say, a Dropbox score or a quiz score, etc., they're all put into the gradebook, and the gradebooks are automatically provisioned, set up in the correct manner from that master space. We also, the reason for doing that was really to minimise the complexity that academics had felt there was with having to set up the gradebooks themselves. So the process, this is I think the most exciting thing. Basically, marks are put into Brightspace by the academics and published to the students for usually the first 3 weeks. At the same time, we're using APIs to pull that assessment data into Oracle, where we produce reports, basically a grade distribution report every week, so the academics can see how their students are going against those distribution reports. On what we used to be called Frantic Friday, it's now just called Final Friday. The academics get together with their grade moderation reports. They sit down, they go through, they modify the grades on Friday afternoon. They input the final marks into Brightspace. Then we run a routine on Friday night. Those grades are pulled from Brightspace into our student management system. There's a bit of juggling around, and then another routine runs on Sunday to sort out grading within the student management system. And then at 6 a.m. on the Monday morning, the students have their final grades released to them, which I don't think any other university has ever managed to achieve. So normally you would finish a semester with 4 units, and then you'd probably wait 3 or 4 weeks until you got your final results. So you waste, or you've waited a semester, and then usually at the end of the year, the second semester, you might wait another few weeks before you really know whether or not you've achieved the outcomes. This is just an example of a grades distribution report, which is given to the academics every week and then consolidated on the final Friday for them to use for that moderation. The way the gradebook works is where you see it says Callista. Callista is our student management system. So when an academic is grading on a final Friday, they enter a code. In this instance, say an L means that a piece of work hasn't been submitted, but there are other specialist codes which can be added. They also may adjust the final grade, and then basically our middleware looks at the grades for every single unit and says, okay, if there is a code against that student, take the code. If otherwise, if there isn't a code, take the adjusted grade, and if there isn't an adjusted grade, just take the calculated grade and pass that across to the SMS. So that's how it works. There's nothing really the academic has to do specially to get this to operate. So yeah, final results in 2 days. That also has the benefit that there are 8 evaluation points during the year when a student can look at themselves, look at their work and say, look, I need to pull up my socks, I need to do more work. Or indeed, you know, they could look and say, I'm doing really, really well, I'd like to undertake an additional unit of delivery. Or we've had students who have not done particularly well and said, you know, perhaps biomedicine isn't for me and I'm going to change my course. But they have that opportunity every 4 weeks. Sections and groups, I'll just cover very, very quickly. As I mentioned, we use the Callista student management system. That basically creates sections in Brightspace where the students are enrolled, and that's for their location, whether it be China or Sydney or a Melbourne campus, and that allows us in the master space also to contextualize for that group of students. So they would be basically put in a group for that campus. And then we also use Allocate Plus for timetabling and for students to select their groups. So again, we create groups and sections based on those. So this has really minimized the amount of time that academics spend in creating their own groups. The other thing we realized was we needed to use all the analytics we could. And just basically whatever we could pull out of Brightspace, we would dump into Oracle and then start on looking at reporting sets that we might need to look at retention, to look at intervention. And as I mentioned, we use H5Ps, which is a nice way of putting something very, I suppose, engaging within the content. And we do that on day 3 and day 7. That's fed back. And that's really used, again, from the retention team to identify whether we've engaged those students and to report on engagement. The other thing, as I mentioned, was we have a mobile-first policy. Students were getting more and more frustrated that we had numerous apps. We had 6 apps in total. Academics, indeed, didn't really know which apps to direct the students to use. Students tend not to like downloading big apps. And quite a few of them said, oh, I've just downloaded it for the day, and then I've deleted it. So we thought, well, we'll have a go at consolidating those into one. I don't know if any of you use DubLabs, the campus app at all. That integrates with Brightspace. We had been using that, but again, that has some downfalls in terms of the way it sort of interacts with Brightspace. So I hired, I was talking to one of the students who had developed an app for us previously, and I said, you know, would she be interested in working on this project? And she would. She was very interested. So I put it to the IT department and said, okay, we're going to consolidate these 6 apps, and I've got a student who's going to project manage it. And they said, you must be joking. How can you allow a student on a corporate tool? I said, no, it'll be okay. In the end, we managed to persuade them that it would be okay. And we had 2 other students that we employed, one as a UX designer, one as a UI designer. And then we also got a programmer who wasn't a student. But we asked what kind of tools did she want to develop the app in. And she said, oh, I want to use Unity. I said, isn't that a gaming platform? She goes, yeah, it's a gaming platform. And I want to connect it to GameSparks so we can start to really gamify the whole process. So we agreed to that. ITS didn't like it at all, but they finally agreed. And we also asked the student-led team to go out and find out what do students really want from an app, and what do they want out of Brightspace? What do they want and what do they not want? They didn't want notifications all the time, that was clear. So we knew that we had to build a system which would allow them to turn off information they did and didn't want. As I mentioned, Brightspace APIs, they were a real source of the information, but we pulled information from everywhere, from a whole range of other systems. We created what we called a learning Fitbit, which basically takes information from Brightspace to show their academic progress, but also allows them to, for example, with those complementary activities I mentioned, when a student books into a complementary activity, they use the app to book into it, and then when they've completed that complementary activity, they use a QR code to capture completion, and that then adds into their Fitbit and other data, things like how many books they've borrowed. We even present them with information about how much or what their fines are for non-returned books. So it's a bit of fun, and we're now in a situation where we know students access the app at least 2 times a day, which is pretty good. I'm now going to play a little video of the app. It'll last a few minutes.
This app really complements The initial project was looking at how we could overcome that and really about consolidating those 6 apps into one app. However, as we started the project, we realised we could be so much more exciting, with so many more things we could achieve within that consolidation.
The approach we took to design and development of the mobile app was being refreshing because we tried to take on the startup mentality within the broader organisational structure of the EU and focus on agility and innovation in terms of the product that we were developing. The outcome of taking a different approach to our ways of working was meaning we've been able to deliver a hugely ambitious product with a limited skeleton team of people, and I think that by adopting innovative ways of working going forward, the EU can really differentiate itself from other organisations and focus on delivering student value.
The VU app has been an awesome project to be a part of. To build the app, our team focused first on creating features that we know students actually need. One of the features we're most excited about is the digital student ID card. Students no longer need to worry whether they have their student ID on them and can use their digital ID in the VU app to borrow books, mark off attendance, paper printing, and more. We built interactive maps from scratch with a focus on inclusivity and accessibility. Students, staff, and visitors can all find their way around Victoria University campuses using the VU app.
The map is fantastic. They enable us to go to any campus, any building at any campus, and know exactly where they're positioned, and indeed the general floor they're on. Combined with the timetable aspect of the app, enables students to find exactly where they're going to be at any given time.
The VU app will be integrated with the university's learning management system, so students can view their unit content, assessments, grades, and more. Students can book, track, and validate learning hub activities and unlock achievements using the VU app.
Although the app is fundamentally around learning and teaching for students, it also provides a myriad of functions to assist students in their day-to-day campus life. The great thing about in-house development of the app is that we don't stop here. We realise there's so much more we can do.
Everywhere we look at Victoria University, we are changing the place of learning.
A bit jerky, but yep. So the app's been an amazing success. We found that students are accessing, as I mentioned, twice a day, but we're seeing more and more students using the mobile app to access their learning content, and which I suppose 12 months ago, using Brightspace Pulse or any of the other apps, students just weren't doing that. So it's been an interesting change. Just a few pictures. And the student ID card, again, it's minimised the amount of, all students seem to lose their cards, and indeed my staff card, within a couple of weeks, the barcode's rubbed off. So having it on my actual phone means I can do so much more. And we're actually now looking at using the phones to enable students to get into different rooms. So we're changing our fobbing system, our security systems across the university. In the future, staff and students will just use their mobile phone to access rooms. And as I mentioned, the maps are quite amazing. The students went to all of our campuses. There were no plans in our facilities. Well, there were a few plans going back to the sort of 1980s, but nothing new. So they actually went floor by floor and redrew every single building on 11 campuses to put into the app. But now we have a back end, which means that facilities can actually update when classrooms change or facilities change, and that will immediately reflect on the app. And because we're using the Cisco system of Wi-Fi, the students can see exactly where they are, but on an XYZ coordinate level. So if they're on level 4, they get shown the floor plan of level 4P building, rather than have to actually select the floor that they want to view. And if they click their link in the timetable, so they can see that they've got a class on, when they click that link, it takes them directly to show them exactly where they have to go for that given class. After a couple of weeks, it was ranked 12th on the Apple App Store for educational apps worldwide, and ranked 2nd for Google Play for educational apps worldwide, which was, for us, pretty amazing. 44,000 plus unique sessions per month. That was within the first month. And 11,800 downloads within the first month. We're now 3 months in, and we are up to 19,000 downloads. So when we have a population of 26,000 students in higher ed, that's a pretty good number. We decided that we were going to enter it into the good, and I've only put these slides in because this happened on Friday. But we thought last Friday, we thought we'll put the app in to the Good Design Awards in Australia. These are some of the major design awards. They've been running since the 1950s. They're an international award, although it's an Australian Good Design Award, it's an international award. And we put it in, and you can see these were some of the, it covers all aspects of design. So from automotive design to household appliances, etc. So you can see that we were competing against people like Tesla, Brabham Automotive, IBM Virtual Personal Cloud, Blackmagic Pro Pocket Camera, along with many others. And we were very surprised because we actually took out the Good Design Gold Award for Best Design of a Mobile App. And there we were last week at the conference. Okay, so that was some good news around the app. But the block, has it worked? I think that the answer is a resounding yes. We've really been amazed by the outcomes. So the average pass rates have increased from 76% to 84%. And we've maintained our assessment standards. I should actually say we've improved our assessment standards because we know that we are going to be audited very shortly because we've made such a fundamental change to the way we run education. So we know we're going to be audited. We know that we have to demonstrate that we haven't dumbed down our assessments as it has been claimed by some. They're actually tighter than they were. Student retention has increased by 7%. Pass rates for students of low socioeconomic status has increased by 15%, and for students from non-English speaking backgrounds, 14%, and amazingly, Indigenous, 19%. And also, more students are achieving higher grades with high distinctions and distinctions, increasing from 6% and 7% respectively. Block teaching. So this gives you an idea of this was for the first year college, the difference between 2017 and 2018 looking at grade results. And you can see in 2018 with the block model, there is a huge increase in the number of students getting higher results. And the number of students failing has really fallen dramatically. And here's another on 1 unit of delivery. So this is 1 subject, 1 unit, the outcomes in terms of improvements from 2017 to 2018. And this one I think is incredible. It really shows you in terms of pass rates what a difference it's made between traditional mode of 1 unit in human physiology and moving to a block mode in terms of fail rates. And we are seeing that in content heavy units. So engineering, health and bio, where traditionally you've got a lot of content to get through. It's not just the block, it's also the fact that we've gone through this total curriculum renewal and move, which has involved learning design, which hasn't necessarily occurred in terms of the delivery of those units in the past. Impact of Brightspace. Now, I'll put this up, but it's kind of a bit obvious. So it's a bit like saying, if you read the book, you will know what's in the book. So we suggest you read the book. But what we have done is track the number of days VU Collaborate or Brightspace has been accessed in the first week of delivery. So the number of times students have logged in to look at their unit on the first week. If they have logged in 7 times, they actually have a 97% chance of passing that unit. If they have only logged in twice in the week, that diminishes down to a 76%. So really, we're just pulling that data with APIs out of Brightspace, but it really does show that if students engage with the online resources that we provision, they have a much, much better chance of passing. This is just overall a comparison rate between, again, 2017 in the orange and the blue in terms of 2018. So those are all the units which are delivered across the first year. And as you can see, there's only a few of them where there's been a negative change. And often that's because the academic hasn't actually wanted to embrace the block. But we are finding more and more are, because it basically means once they have their unit ready, designed, within a master space, they can then opt to, for example, teach 3 blocks in a row or 4 blocks in a row, and then that frees them up for the remainder of the year to do research or indeed take a holiday. So, and that flexibility wasn't around in terms of a 12-week model. Commencing load retention, this basically shows how, in terms of retention, how we are doing. And again, there's significant improvement across the board in retention. Right, I'm done. Any questions? Thank you. Sorry, I rushed through that very quickly, but...
One question.
Yep.
So, for the engagement that you showed in terms of number of times people log in, are you using that as predictive? To do an intervention if they're not logging in?
That's all part of the... We are, not just that data. So we pull data from Brightspace in terms of the number of logins. We pull data from the H5P interactives, which we set up on those. We pull data from overall assessments, things like engagement and discussion forums. Then we also look at whether or not they've completed any complementary activities and indeed scan those. All of that data in week 1 is really utilised to better inform us, and then in the second week, on day 7, we do the same thing, and it's compared, and then that kind of triggers an intervention, and those students are contacted. Yeah.
So at my university, there's a lot of about how you freedom to design and control your own courses. And it sounds like you were able to really make things consistent because they use the learning designers. And I'm wondering how that process. Could you describe the learning designer and faculty interaction?
Sure. We've always... We haven't got the luxury of being able to sort of pay for learning designers to do everything for the academics, and nor do we want that to occur. So it's basically a partnership. The learning design team, which usually consists of 2 learning designers, a librarian, and then some students as staff. We employ students as staff. We'll sit down with the academic or the team of academics, look at their past delivery over 12 weeks, and then make suggestions on how they might be able to improve it in terms of making their assessments more authentic or making the activities, because a lot of them used to just be very transmissional in terms of lectures. So we would look at alternatives for that. Once we'd got the go-ahead, and there was a real project management process in terms of we'd have sign-on and then we'd have work, and we'd expect deliverables from those academics over the 6 weeks, and then there would be a sign-off at the end. Most of the time we would show the academics how to do something once, so we'd show them how to create an H5P once, then we'd expect them to do it themselves, or how to create a rubric in Brightspace, or indeed set up a discussion forum or something like that. But when an academic got excited about, say, an H5P, we would then, if it was going to be like a branching scenario or something a little bit more complex, we would then get a student of staff to co-produce it with them. We started off using students who were not studying that particular course. Now we've changed. So now we actually employ the students who are studying that unit to build the content that they will then consume. And that's had an amazing effect as well, because we haven't got all the data, but at the moment it looks like the students who help build the course get better results. So that's been a bit of change, and the academics seem to like it. They seem to like working with the students on creating the content. And we've moved away now, and that's also assisted because we've moved away from 65-page PowerPoints. What we do now is we get them to try and chunk those down using, again, H5P to create course presentations. So they might cut it down to 6, all those slides down to 6 course presentations, and embed within those things like questions, rollovers, hotspots, etc. Yeah. Great. Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.